and say, let's dig. Turn to your neighbor and say, you dig. Turn to your neighbor and say, you dig, I dig, we dig. Turn to your neighbor and say, let's dig for this Sunday.
We are the digger people here.
Baruch Hashem Yahweh. Now, verse 8. For finding fault with the stinking law of Moses, the Lord Jesus...
How is that?
No, it says in verse 8, finding fault with them. Who's the them? I have good news and bad news. The Torah is not the them. The bad news is your fathers who ate manna in the wilderness and still died because they didn't believe the promise of Yahweh and they did not enter into the land of Canaan, the land flowing with milk and honey. Eretz zavat chalav u'devash. The problem, the fault was with our ancestors. Yisrael. To say that there's a fault, a flaw, something missing in Yahweh's holy, set-apart, eternal Torah means that the gift is warped, and if the gift is warped, the giver of the gift is himself warped, because he has given a gift to humanity that is warped, which means that the giver of the gift is warped, which means Yahweh would implode, he would cease to exist, he would no longer be perfect, he would no longer be the Kadosh One of Yisrael. If he gave a Torah that was imperfect, impure, had blemish and fault, how could he tell us to choose a lamb, an animal, a goat, a bull, without blemish, without spot, without wrinkle? How could he tell us to bring him unblemished, pure, tahor, pure offerings? When he himself gave us a blemished, faulty document of legalismo. You've been taught wrong, sweetheart. You want the truth? You're going to have to leave family, friends, brothers and sisters. You're going to have to want this more than McDonald's. You're going to have to want this more than food. You're going to be ridiculed, lampooned. A man's enemies will be those of his own house. 2 against 3, 3 against 2. A son against their father, a father against their son. Do not think I have come to bring peace on earth, says Yahshua, but a sword. For it is written, a man's enemies shall be those of his own house. I have come to mikvah the world in fire, and how earnestly I am straitened until that mikvah be accomplished. You're going to have to want this truth enough to leave that system. Everyone in this room has made a conscious choice to leave that system. You cannot change that system. The system cannot be changed. As I say very often, I'll write you a $20,000 check if you can give me the name of one person who stayed in the Catholic Church or the Lutheran Church or any other mausoleum and changed it from within as a light. The Lord has called me to stay and be a light. Have you closed the doors down? Have the doors closed down? Has that congregation locked up? Has the archdiocese gone out of business? Go ahead. Give me the name of the archdiocese that someone you knew has changed by their abiding in that system. And I'll write you that check. What happens is their light gets snuffed out. The salt loses its saltiness and is good for nothing except to be trodden underfoot of man. Are you with me?
Come on.
Now let's go back to the text. Verse 8. For finding fault with them. So Yahweh found fault not with his word, not with his Torah, because Yeshua is the Torah made flesh. We know Yeshua is the perfect spotless lamb who taketh away the sins of the world. And so if the Torah had a fault, then Yeshua had a fault. And if Yeshua had a fault, then Yeshua was blemished. And if Yeshua was blemished, he was not the perfect lamb. He was not Cordero de Yahweh, who could take away the sins of the world. So Yahweh found fault. Turn to your neighbor and say, Yahweh found fault. Okay. You guys sound like you're on cough medicine.
Yahweh found fault.
Yahweh found fault. Let's try that again. Found fault. Now, historic Christianity has taught us that the fault was the 5 books of Moshe. Yahweh says, no, I found fault with them. So notice, verse 7, evidence. Let's build the case. The word covenant does not appear. Verse 7 says, the first was not faultless. If it had been, no place would have been for the second. So something first had faults, and then verse 8, Yahweh tells you what had a fault.
That's right.
Why don't we believe Yahweh? What is wrong with us? Why do we think we know more than Yahweh? Why do we think we can interpret the word of Yahweh better than he can interpret? If you let Yahweh interpret Hebrews 8:7 with Hebrews 8:8, you'll be better off. Why do you let that man on Sunday interpret the word of Yahweh for you? Why?
Because they don't study.
He that has ears to hear, let him hear what the Ruach is saying to the Kehillah. Look at verse 8. Finding fault with them. So Yahweh says, here's what had fault. The reason I had to find a second to come in instead of the first is them. Turn to your neighbor and say, it's them.
Them.
Find another neighbor that's awake and say, it's them.
It's them.
It's them. Who's them? Our forefathers who came out of Mitzrayim, who were in the wilderness, who disobeyed Yahweh. We made the golden calf. We worshipped idolatry. We turned our back on Moshe. We turned our back on Yahweh. We turned our back on the things and the miracles and the things that we had seen and heard in Mitzrayim, and we're willing to settle for a bag of chips, leeks, and onions. We adopted a mentality that Yahweh brought us out in the wilderness to die, and that we would have been better off in Mitzrayim, because at least in Mitzrayim there were graves, and at least in Mitzrayim there were tombstones and places to be buried, whereas out in the wilderness we can't even have a proper burial among the sand. That was your papa. That was Ephraim. That was your Judah. That was your ancestors. And Yahweh found fault with them. He said, none of these bozos, that's New York paraphrase, shall enter my rest except Yehoshua and Caleb, because in them dwells a different kind of spirit. A spirit of emunah, faith, trust, belief. Not faith, oh, Yeshua is Lord, now I can break every covenant because I'm not under the law. No, a faith and a belief that trusts him and trusts him enough to do and live like he did. When the Bible uses the word faith, it's the Hebrew word emunah, which means trust. A lifestyle that is willing to do what he did in the face of ridicule, laughter, and in the face of the degradation of others. Are you with me? So Yahweh said, I found fault with them. Look at verse 8. So, the first was full of faults. Because the first was full of faults, the second came. Now, Yahweh said, I'm not talking about my Torah, I'm talking about them. Is the Torah a them, or is it an it?
Them.
It's an it. Them is a people.
Right.
Then Yahweh further explains this to you if you're listening. In verse 8 when he says, here's the them. Turn to your neighbor and say, here's the them.
Here's the them.
Here's the them.
Thank you, Brian. Here's the them. See, the days are coming, saith Yahweh, when I will conclude with the house of Yehudah and the house of Israel a renewed covenant. Yahweh just answered his own question. The fault was with them. What them? Both houses of Israel. Jewish Israel, the kingdom of Israel was 12 tribes. In the days of Rehoboam and Jeroboam, it split into two separate kingdoms. The north, 10 tribes under Jeroboam. The south, 2 tribes plus Levi under Rehoboam. And the two kingdoms have never been united since the days of King David and King Shlomo. And Yeshua has come to reunite both houses of Israel. And Yahweh says that the them is the problem. The them is not just anybody. It is the 12 tribes who became divided into both houses of Israel. The 10 tribes became the latter-day Gentiles, or the Melo HaGoyim, the fullness of the nations. And the Gentile believers in Yeshua are the former 10 tribes of Israel. And that's a whole nother message for a whole nother time. And if you're born again and washed in the blood, and you're not Jewish, you are directly descended from the 10 tribes of Israel. And I can prove it to you from Scripture with no emotion, no string pulling, and no pontification added. But we don't have the time right now. If you love Yeshua, you're washed in the blood, you're born again, you trust in the Messiah's death, burial, and resurrection, and you're not Jewish, you have come directly descended from the 10 tribes of Israel. And I can prove it to you from the word of Yahweh with hundreds of scriptures, or thousands if we have the time. And those who go to the Miami Beach Israel Revival can share these things with you as well.
Oh, Baruch Hashem Yahweh.
Are you with me?
Yes, Father.
Now, finding fault with
Them.
them. Who's the them? The house of Israel and the house of Yehudah. Amen?
All of you.
He said, so where was the fault, Tehillah? Where was the fault? In the Torah? No.
No.
In Genesis?
Them.
Deuteronomy? Bamidbar? Where was the fault?
With them.
The church has told us that what was done away with was the first covenant. Isn't it interesting that the word covenant was added to the text?
Added.
Isn't it interesting the word covenant ain't nowhere in the text?
The Roman lie.
Yeah. Oh man.
It's nowhere there. They had to add it to make you think that the Torah has been done away with the coming of the Messiah. You know why Jews don't accept the Messiah? Do you want to know why? Because they know the Messiah is going to teach Torah to the nations. They see Jesus, who comes to kill Jews, eat pig, and nail the Torah to the cross, and teach the church how to find new holidays instead of the true set-apart days of Yahweh. And they said, this ain't no Jewish Messiah. I'm not buying. I'm not buying. Don't tell me about this guy. When you find a Messiah who taught his disciples the Torah and had to live by the Torah, come back and witness to me, but not before that.
That's right. That's what's happening. That is what's happening.
It's no mystery why Jews don't accept Yeshua. Because we're portraying a man who never lived.
That's right.
The real rabbi did teach Torah. In Matthew 28, he said, go into all the world in the Great Commission and teach the whole world, make Talmidim of the whole world, teaching them what I have taught you. What did he teach? He said, I receive nothing except to come from the
That's
Father.
right.
I teach nothing except to come from the Father. I give nothing except to come from the Father. What came from the Father is the Torah, and what came from Yeshua's mouth came from the Father.
Amen.
Deuteronomy 18:18.
Amen.
So Yeshua only taught Torah.
That's right.
Torah.
Maybe if you start showing the Jewish people a Yeshua who came to live by his Father's Torah and make us set apart by following the Father's Torah, maybe they'll listen to your witness.
That's right. That's right.
See, the days are coming, saith Yahweh, when I will conclude with the house of Yisrael and the house of Yehudah a renewed covenant. So where was the fault?
With them.
So where was the fault? In both houses.
Yes, both houses.
Judah can't say Ephraim is the fault. Ephraim can't say Judah is the fault. Both houses had fault.
False.
Are you with me? Now go down to verse 9. You see how verse 8 explains verse 7? You see that? We don't need false teaching, replacement theology, dispensational theology. We don't need that. All we need to understand verse 7 is verse 8. Now to further understand verse 8, what do you think we're going to use now?
Number 9.
Verse 9. This is real hard. This is not designed to be difficult. Now look at verse 9. Ephraim 8:9. Not according to the covenant I made with their fathers in the... So who is the them? The house of Israel, the house of Judah, further defined as their fathers. Who are those who had fault? Ephraim's fathers, Judah's fathers, their fathers. Are you with me?
Yes.
If Yahweh, listen, let's use our logic. Let's use our intelligence. If Yahweh's Torah has faults, if it has mistakes, if it has errors, then the giver himself becomes blemished and unworthy of holiness, unworthy of worship, unworthy of adoration, unworthy of praise, unworthy of our affection, and unworthy of our allegiance. You think about what I'm telling you. If the church is right, historic Christianity, and the Torah is what is at fault, we need another Father and we need another Bible. But we know that's not the case.
Not the case.
Turn to your neighbor and say, that's not the case.
Not the case.
Look at verse 9. Not according to the covenant I made with the fathers of the house of Israel and the house of Judah, the 12 sons of Yaakov, in the day when I took them by their hand to lead them out of the land of Mitzrayim, because they did not continue in my covenant, I disregarded them, saith Yahweh. Now I want to teach you. How many folks are paying attention? How many folks are enthralled by this message? Huh?
We're swooning.
How many folks are in a spiritual swoon? Alright. Now, ready for this? Sometime the anti-missionaries who try to take believers, messianic believers, and take them out of Torah keeping and following the true Messiah, Yeshua of Nazareth, into traditional Judaism, they harp on this text. Some of you have seen this, but have never really seen this. I'm going to show you something here that contradicts the original quote in Jeremiah. And it's in my new book, which will be available this week. It's almost sold out, by the way.
Hallelujah.
Okay, it's just about sold out. So if you want copies, let me know. Jeremiah 30, Hebrews 8:9. So the fathers were the ones who had fault. Amen? So who were the ones that had fault, Tehillah? The fathers.
Two
All right, let's
houses.
further define the fathers.
From the two
The
houses.
two houses, the fathers of the two houses. And so Yahweh said I had to take away those people and bring in another people, but not another people, but a renewed people. I took away the first family of Israel and brought in the second family of Israel, because in the first family of Israel, there was fault upon fault upon fault. Well, Rabbi, that's not what I learned. I know, sweetheart. I know that. I know that. But you notice, we haven't added to the text, and we haven't taken away from the text. All we've done is let verse 8 explain verse 7, and let verse 9 explain verse 8. Are you with me?
Amen.
You don't have to twist the word of Yahweh if you're preaching truth. It's getting quiet now. Now watch this. So where is the fault? The fault was with the fathers. From when? When did Yahweh start finding fault with the fathers of the house of Israel and the house of Yehudah, both houses of Israel? The very day we left Mitzrayim. We didn't wait till we got to Mount Sinai and start making golden calf and have orgies. The problem, the complaining, the bitching, the backbiting, pardon my Latin, began the very day we left Mitzrayim.
Very day.
And that's why I throw people out of here. You're going to complain and gossip and gripe, and all you can do is find fault. Yahweh, I'm going to do the same thing to you that Yahweh did to us corporately. I'm going to ask you to leave. Because I don't have time to listen to you talk about Sergio and talk about Abraham and talk about me, because they're not talking about you. They come here to focus in on Yahweh. They come here to grow. They come here to be edified. They come here to be raised in their stature in the things of Yahweh. And if all you can do is talk about how short her head covering is and how short her dress is, why don't you go over and model it for her and teach her and lovingly show her or him what they're doing wrong, instead of getting on the phone and calling 50 people and pointing out someone else's fault. We all have faults. We can make a 10-hour sermon of my faults.
It's Lashon Hara. It's bad.
That's right. And your faults, probably about the same, a 10 or 12-hour sermon just on your shortcomings.
50 hours. 50
We
hours.
all have shortcomings. Is that why we're the assembly of Israel? Or do we overcome and wrestle with these shortcomings and become new creatures and new creatures in the Messiah Yeshua who will change our vile body and fashion it like unto his glorious body by the power whereby he is able to work all